This is episode 90 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And helping me celebrate 2 years of podcasting, Jivana will be discussing accessible yoga now and in the future. Let's listen. Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. This is Changing the Face of Yoga, and I have a great guest today. It's Jivana, who is a certified yoga therapist, an experienced 500-level yoga teacher, and the founder and director of Accessible Yoga, an international nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing access to the yoga teachings for people of all abilities and backgrounds. Accessible Yoga offers 2 conferences per year, which focus on community building and education, as well as a popular ambassador program and accessible yoga trainings. Jivana is co-owner of the Santa Barbara Yoga Center and an integral yoga minister. For over 25 years, Jivana has specialized in teaching yoga to people with disabilities with an infinite emphasis on social engagement. So welcome, Jivana. I'm so glad that you are going to be a guest on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie.
This is part of the second year celebration of Changing the Face of Yoga, and I've asked Jivana to think about why the trend in yoga right now is we're now seeing some rather serious inroads into providing yoga for everyone and people with disabilities, large-bodied people, seniors, children. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to ask him his thoughts about why he thinks this has occurred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it's a great question. And I'm very excited to see this change. You know, I think that it feels like a real success story right now for people doing this work for accessible yoga as well. You know, I feel like tides have changed a little bit and there's just more awareness that yoga is useful and effective for everyone. I think that's why, actually. I think the why behind it is just that yoga is just increasing in popularity and people are starting to realize that there's so much benefit there. And so the next question, of course, is, well, then, you know, why can't we all get that benefit? Or is it reserved just to certain people who can do certain kinds of physical practice? And I think that question is being asked more and more.
So do you think it's more of people who do not fit the stereotype of a yoga person who are asking for classes, or is it going the other way where people who are training themselves to be able to give classes to, you know, other populations?
I think what's been happening actually in the last few years is that the yoga media hasn't been accurately reflecting the yoga community. I think there's been, you know, it could just be that I'm immersed in this world of accessible yoga, but I just know so many teachers and so many students doing this work and sharing it all over the world. So, I mean, to me, it's clear that this has already been happening for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I always say, like, I didn't create this concept. I mean, accessible yoga is just, I created this organization, but this is work that's been going on way before me. And I think, like I said, what's happening is that yoga media is not reflecting the truth of who is already practicing. And I think that it came out recently, I don't know, and there was like a controversy around the yoga journal covers.
Yeah.
You know, do you see that? I don't know. I can explain that a little bit. But
go ahead, yeah.
I mean, basically, I think that's a good example of what's happening in terms of awareness in the yoga community around this question. And I mean, it's kind of a complicated story, but basically, the Yoga Journal agreed to announced actually I think it was in October, that they would put Jessamyn Stanley, who's a larger bodied African American woman, on the cover. And she's incredibly well known, and she's been around for years. And I mean, I think they should have put her on the cover years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very excited to hear that announcement, and other people were excited. And then they kind of backtracked, and they held an online competition about whether she should be on the cover or this other well-known teacher who's, a thin white woman doing fancy poses. In the end, they split the covers half and half and put both of these women on. And I think it was, I don't know, it's a complicated story, but I think in the end, actually a couple of things. One is, I think it's great that they put Jessamyn Stanley on there at all,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're trying to hedge their bets, kind of, like they didn't really want to go all the way. And they're trying to figure out how to kind of have both things, like keep their kind of mainstream audience that they think is interested in yoga, mostly for physical practice, and then also begin to show the diversity of yoga. But I think the fact that that's happening at Yoga Journal, which is maybe the most conservative of yoga media, actually. I mean, I think they're kind of like the last, I would say they're like the last bastion of what I see as like last decade's yoga, or like the 90s and, the yoga that was happening back then. I mean, I think for them to be making this transition, that means that it's done. You know what I mean? Like yoga has changed.
Okay.
So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's positive. I was going to ask you about that, because I was talking to someone who teaches many things, but he does teach a large-bodied classes. That's his main focus. And he thinks that, yes, there's been a lot of progress in expanding yoga's perception that it is for everyone, but he feels that there's really some pushback, and it's coming from the corporate type of yoga, because often these specialized yoga classes, like he was saying, in large-bodied yoga, they're not going to be wearing the mainstream yoga clothes, and they need bigger mats, and they need more space, so you can't get as many people into your classes. And I know when I taught seniors, I kept them small because I wanted to be having that, really focusing on the students. And so I'm wondering if you've seen that too, where it may not be as financially attractive to have people who are not young, white, and wealthy.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that is an issue, actually, that there are large yoga chains in particular that offer more of a gym style of intense physical practice, and they're really pushing, they are still marketing yoga in that particular way, because it's true, that's how they make their money. And I think that will continue to be so. But I guess in a way, it feels like, this is what I was recently writing about this. It's almost like there's two different yogas. I feel like when people talk about yoga, I have to ask them, what are you talking about? Which yoga are you talking about? Because to me, it's like there's kind of that gym yoga, and then there's what I think of as yoga, or accessible yoga, but really it's just yoga. And that's the practice that anyone can do. And I guess I'd like to say that it's important to talk about the fact that accessible yoga isn't like this effort just to be inclusive of people with disabilities. To me, accessible yoga is trying to get back to more of the essence of what yoga is, which is that yoga is spiritual practice that's changed a lot over thousands of years. And really, we're looking at male monastics, that's where it started. But ever since it came to the West, I think it's been growing and changing, at least in the last 50 or so years or more. Probably it's almost 100 years, really, that yoga has been in the West. But at its essence, the teachings of yoga are accessible, because the main concept is that we are spiritual beings. We have this essential nature, and that the body is constantly changing and basically temporary, but our spirit or soul is immortal. And I think that is something we all have. It doesn't matter what kind of body you have, right? We're all equal in spirit. I always want to say that when I talk about this, that it's not that I'm trying to change yoga, actually, or say, oh, yoga should be made accessible. The essential point of yoga is already accessible, right? It's something that's shared by everyone. And we have changed it to become something else, a physical practice that's really designed for very able-bodied people. And I say one other thing that's interesting, I think, is that, I could talk about this forever, I guess. But I would say I think the other thing that's coming out and going to be more and more, I don't know, there's going to be more awareness around, which is the potential dangers of an intense physical practice. Because I think there are these kind of very flexible, perhaps people with hypermobile syndrome, like hypermobile joint syndrome, who have the ability to get into a lot of these poses, and that actually they're hurting themselves if they practice in a very intense kind of gymnastic or calisthenic way for a long period of time. And we're seeing more of that in the news. Some well-known yoga teachers who had to have hip replacements, for example, as a result of their intense physical practice. And I think that awareness also helps to balance out our work, which is to show that, yoga is not about that. It's not about getting into that complicated pose.
Right.
That's not,
Good. So to look to the future, do you think it will continue to be divided, shall we say? Or is it slowly going to come together to just be yoga?
Mm-hmm. I actually think it might continue to be divided because I almost think that physical yoga, maybe they should come up with a new name. maybe they need to rebrand. They could call it something else, like I don't know what, but like kickboxing yoga or something like that. But I mean, I guess I would hope that we come together, and I do think in many ways we will. But the way that I see coming together is actually more diverse, integrated, mixed level classes, and that's what I really try to train teachers to be able to teach. I think in order to make accessible yoga more mainstream, yoga teachers have to, like all yoga teachers, need to have these skills. And the skills I'm talking about is just being able to address almost anyone who comes into the room, meaning that like you don't have to be a yoga therapist. So if someone has an obvious recent injury or they're going through some kind of treatment for a chronic illness or something, maybe they need a specialized class. But a lot of people, even people with disabilities, just want to go to a yoga class. They don't necessarily need yoga therapy. They just want to go to a group class and be part of a group. And I think it's quite easy to integrate people of any level in a class if you have the skills to do it.
No, I just wondered what those skills might be.
Well, a lot of that is what I teach in my training. And the main skills, it's quite simple, really, I think, is learning how to teach multiple levels of a pose at the same time. And, I think a lot of us think we're doing that, but we're not. We're actually teaching separate poses. So like, I don't know, you probably had this experience. We have some students in the chair and some on the mat at the same time.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. And the tendency as a teacher is to teach one, like teach the people in the chair and then teach the people on the mat. And I feel like it's very challenging to integrate them, but it's actually essential to integrate the experience in that group so that people feel more equal and they're part of the group together. So the skills that I teach are like find the language that can allow you to teach a pose or practice at the same time at different levels. So for example, and I'll tell you my trick actually, which is you teach the preparation separately, but then you come into the practice together. Does that make sense?
It made sense, but I think I needed an example.
All right. So an example I can use is like cobra pose is always the one I use. But so in cobra pose, if you have some students in a chair and some on the mat, you can come into the preparation separately. So you would say for the students on the mat, they're lying on their abdomen, they have their hands under their shoulders, forehead on the floor. Students in the chair, I like to practice cobra with a bolster on the lap in the chair, so they could have a bolster on their lap or lean forward. If they have a bolster, the hands on the bolster, leaning all the way forward with the head down. And then, now I would say together, we could all breathe together. Exhale, and then everyone inhale, lengthen the spine, and slowly raise up the head, neck, and chest. And then continue with my instruction about cobra, which could be for both, mat practice and chair practice. Well, does that make sense?
No, it does. It does. And I'm impressed. I've never done cobra with people in a chair before. I've done it on the wall, but I think that's a very good idea, because what I found was that people would always take, if they had choices, if they didn't have to be in a chair, say, but they didn't really prefer being on the mat, they often would choose the most difficult one. And it used
oh yeah.
drive me crazy.
Every time. That's human nature. That's human nature though. We have to learn about how to handle that as yoga teachers. I mean, it's just human nature. If you give people a choice of different things and say, this is the most advanced one, everyone, almost 90% of people at least, will do the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, but
I don't either.
That's another skill. That's another skill though, which is to learn how to give instruction without making one thing sound more advanced than the other. And to find a way to give value to the supposedly easier thing. Yeah. And I spend a lot of time in that when I teach, talking about simplicity and subtlety. And actually, I often say that in yoga, the more subtle is the more powerful, which is true, actually. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that we've lost our way a bit. Even those of us doing accessible yoga, I think we often buy into the physicality of extreme practice and feel like, oh, if I go further in the pose, I get more benefit. And that's actually not true.
No.
That's completely incorrect, actually. So I think we're doing our students a disservice if we just let them believe that lie, that more is better. That's not true. Yeah. It's not more is not better in yoga. It's funny, right?
Would it be fair to say that really what's happening is that a certain group of people in yoga are beginning to understand that very simple ideal that you just talked about, that it's really the simple, subtle parts of yoga that we should be looking at instead of the physical part?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's, again, the people that I know and what I see and the yoga world that I'm a part of, that's definitely happening. There's definitely more awareness. I mean, I see it also happening in the there's like the anatomy and physiology people like who are really changing yoga now and looking at it in a different way and looking at, bringing in body mechanics. And it's interesting to see how they're approaching the same question about safety. That's the way they would approach it, safety. Mm-hmm. And I approach it more from like maybe a question of, there's a word to sum it up, but of like efficiency, or efficacy, like why do we practice? Let's get to the core of that reason and make those essential practices available to people. And that's the other thing I try to teach teachers is that if you understand a practice for yourself, like cobra, like you have to start really by asking yourself, why do it? Why am I doing this practice? You know what I mean? Is it because someone told me to? Because my teacher just said this is a good thing? Or do I actually know why? Is there a benefit to me that I experience or my students experience? And how can I make that benefit available to a wide range of students without harming them by going too far? I think those questions are being asked, actually. Okay. And I also think that we're just getting more mature, I think, as a Western yoga community. You know what I mean? We're growing up, I think. I hope. I hope so.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I talk to people who want to make yoga accessible in all kinds of different ways. And so I never know if I really have an overall view of what yoga is, but I just have a slice of it. And that's why I ask a lot of these questions to see how people are reacting and what they're seeing out there. So,
well, yeah, you probably get a lot, from all the people you interview. I feel the same way. That's why I mean, our conferences, accessible yoga conferences are like that for me, where I get to invite the people who I feel like are asking or answering that question of what yoga is right now. How do we make it accessible? How do we make it effective and inclusive? And it's really fun to get to hear them, So I kind of get to invite people who I'm interested in learning from, and then they come.
Yes, I know, it's fun, isn't it? It's lovely to talk to people who are, have ideas and experts in their field. So I'm not sure we've covered this. Maybe we haven't. If you think we have, just say so. But are we looking at, you think that yoga is going to remain to an extent divided? Do you think it will ever come together in the West?
It's such a hard thing to know, about the future. But I guess I like the way I answered it earlier was yes and no, basically, which is I don't think that the extreme physical practice is going away anytime soon. I think that it's like that practice might become it might go the way of like step aerobics and kind of just be integrated into a gym environment. You know what I mean? Like I see that for sure. Like I definitely see that the physical world of yoga, the extreme practice will just kind of get lost into the other physical practices that tend to be trendy. But I think the people who are really interested in yoga for maybe deeper personal reasons will continue to practice. And I think that's the practice I'm interested in, more of and I don't mean to judge people who are doing physical practice. I mean, that's good too. And it sounds really snotty to be talking about it this way, but I'm just saying, I think there's like practice just for exercise, which is fine. That's good too.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's people who are practicing more for that spiritual, emotional, and mental health benefits. I think that community is what I see finally growing up and coming together. And I think that community is becoming more inclusive and diverse. Definitely. I mean, definitely becoming more diverse, and so much more awareness around the need for diversity and inclusivity and accessibility. That's the exciting thing to me about the next 10 years in yoga, is seeing that take off. Although my hesitation and my worry, I guess, I shouldn't maybe say this publicly, but I do worry that those large yoga brands, the clothing brands and stuff, and the yoga chains, I think they're going to begin seeing this as the next marketing opportunity. And I think organizations like Accessible Yoga really are going to be challenged to speak for ourselves rather than having large corporations take over that message. Because if they're smart, they will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised that they haven't, because I can't remember exactly which year. I think it was 2016 or something like that. Somebody did a survey, and over half of the yoga students were over 40. And that's, you're not doing, well, some people may be doing really extreme physical, but the average, you wouldn't be. And I couldn't figure out why they were still marketing to very physical practice yogis. So,
well, I think it has to do with clothing a lot, actually. I mean, I do
really?
think that, oh yeah, I really do. I don't think we see the impact of major marketing campaigns related to clothing brands, and how much money they have to put behind their messages. And, like you were saying earlier, I mean, to sell clothing, it's not that larger body people or older people don't need clothing too, but it's just the way that clothing is sold and marketed, I should say, is, through that aspirational model where you have models who look like, oh, I want to be like that. I want that lifestyle. And so you want to buy the thing that they have to try to capture that for yourself. I don't think we'll see that going away. I mean,
that's just marketing.
That's just marketing.
Yeah.
I mean, then clothing companies have been doing it forever, but I do think they'll start to add on additional campaigns, to kind of tap into this new market. And I think we see it happening already. I think that yoga journal cover is the beginning of it, of kind of a new inclusive kind of modeling campaign. It's funny, I feel so torn about it, because in a way, you want that change to happen, right? Like I should be quick. I mean, I want that change to happen, that clothing companies start to advertise and use more inclusive body types and more diverse body types, and skin color and background and everything, and an ability, like people with disabilities should be in these ads too.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, it just feels like they're kind of co-opting the message, and so it's painful in a way. And so I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we remain control of the message as a grassroots movement and not allow ourselves to be co-opted by corporate interests? And I don't know what the answer is to that.
No, I don't either. I'm trying to think of other arenas where that might have happened. It is difficult, isn't it? Because spirituality.
Because it can feel like success. You know what I mean? To have more diverse imagery feels successful, and that's in a way what we want. But yeah, I just think we have to be careful that we don't get lost. I was approached recently by Lululemon, and I think, I'm going to talk to them about it, but I also think, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say.
No, I understand, because the corporate ethos is to make a profit, and how can they make a profit off of you? Quite frankly.
Exactly. And now they want to come into kind of this more diverse community and make a profit. I was like, okay, well, but you should do that, but also we need to do it in a more ethical way and think about, how do you give back more? How do you take care of the communities that you're that you're selling to? I mean, that's all, that's really what I go to. And I know that Lululemon is giving some money away, but it's a tiny percentage of their profit. And I really think
really?
that's, yeah, I think that's a challenge to them, which is, I believe they're giving away something like, they've given away like about $5 million over the last 3 years to nonprofit yoga organizations, which is great. That sounds like a lot of money. But if you look into their income, Lululemon, now I would say their gross profit in that same time period is probably $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah, $2 billion. So, I mean, it's just, it's great to give away 5 million, but when you're making 2 billion, I'm not sure it really means anything.
Yeah. It is an interesting dilemma, isn't it? Because I don't know how your experience, but my experience was, and that could be just my inability in business, was that I loved doing the senior classes, but they certainly weren't wildly profitable. And people that are doing large-bodied yoga are saying, hey, I've got to have a smaller number of people in my class. I wonder how, and often the people that might need accessible yoga may not have a lot of money.
Right.
So there's a dichotomy.
Yeah, there is, for sure. I agree. I don't think accessible yoga by nature is extremely profitable. It's hard to scale it up to the kind of gym type yoga classes that have huge numbers of people with perhaps more money. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely think that to me is maybe the biggest challenge for the accessible yoga community, is about making it profitable, mostly for the teachers. I mean, my concern is for people who are teaching in a very accessible and inclusive way. And I just want to see them being able to make a living and support themselves when they're doing good work. And it worries me that, they can't. I think, one simple thing is just that people who teach this way, who might teach underserved or marginalized communities, are often asked to teach for free. And I just think that's unfortunate, because to be a yoga teacher and to get additional training in a specialty area, or just to get better trained, is just very expensive. And then to be asked to teach for free isn't really fair. Well, you can be asked, but I just don't think it's fair to expect people to do that if it's their work and they need to eat.
Yes.
They need to have clothes,
rent, all those things.
Yeah. And I can't tell how many times I've been asked to come teach for free, and it's a little bit frustrating. So I just think we need to value that. There's a value in a well-trained yoga teacher, and they deserve to be paid well. But like you said, maybe some communities can't afford that. So then we need additional models. And that's why I kind of connected back to corporate interests. So to me, it's like there is a lot of money there. I mean, that's the other part that feels like such a weird paradox, that yoga is a multi-billion dollar industry, and yet 99% of yoga teachers I know cannot make a decent living from yoga. And that's not acceptable. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
It just doesn't make any sense.
No, I certainly
all that money. Sorry?
No, I certainly couldn't have lived off my yoga earnings.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's taken, for me, I had to do a combination of things my whole life, mostly administration, running yoga studios. I couldn't just survive on teaching because I didn't have the energy to teach. I would have to teach so many classes, to make a living. That teaching 9 to 5 every day, it was just not possible. And that's just it's not how teaching works. I mean, I would have to travel between classes, and so what I would always do for years and years is do a combination of teaching really as much as I could, and then do administrative work to balance it out. And I mean, I had a million different jobs, but I eventually just managed yoga studios because I wanted to be in that environment. And of course, running teacher training, teacher training is more profitable generally than regular teaching or privates. I mean, those are the two areas I see teachers making a decent amount of money, is teacher training and private teaching. But still, I think I agree that accessible yoga classes need to be more profitable. And I don't know how to make them that way, other than looking at corporate sponsorship through nonprofit organizations, for example, that can get grants I've talked to Yoga Alliance about this. They have a foundation. I've asked them to consider giving grants directly to yoga teachers who are serving marginalized communities. I don't know why that couldn't happen. They have a lot of money. They could even raise more money to pay yoga teachers directly, which I think would be amazing. So I think there's ways to do it, but it's going to take a lot of work. And that is definitely, to me, the biggest problem that we're facing here. Sure.
So do you see some progress made in that area in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it'll be solved, though, in 10 years.
Okay.
I see progress for sure.
Okay.
Like I said, the fact that Yoga Alliance is even talking about it is huge progress. That they are looking at how to support this work. In fact, they kind of organized themselves last year or something, and they have their foundation. I think the mission of their foundation is to make yoga accessible, which I was really moved by. It's like, yeah, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And that's what you should do with all that money. If teachers are paying in for their membership, give that money back. So I don't know, that makes me excited. And I think, I was criticizing Lululemon, but at least they're giving some money away. There are other clothing brands that are yoga connected that don't give any money away. So in a way, Lululemon is an easy target because they're the biggest. But I think they could show other clothing brands how to do it right and how to give away a decent percentage of their income to give it back to the communities that are buying their clothes and to make yoga available to people who can't afford it. I think that's essential. And you also, there's so many nonprofits bringing yoga directly to people, in schools, in prisons. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm amazed at them, really.
It's beautiful.
It is amazing. Okay.
And we're working with, I'll just say one organization that people should know about is the Yoga Service Council, who I love, and Accessible Yoga is working with them right now. And they have a similar mission to us. But they focus more on supporting organizations that do the work like this.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to focus more on yoga teachers. But.
Yeah. Okay. Both can be helpful to get it out there. Okay. Well, as usual, Jivana, we have great conversations. Is there anything that you would like to add that you don't think we've covered in enough detail, or perhaps didn't cover at all before I give your contact details?
I mean, I could talk about this forever. I thank you for letting me talk about it. I'm excited that I have a book coming out in the fall on accessible yoga, and really it's designed to be for students who don't think they can do yoga, for people who just don't think yoga is for them because of a misunderstanding or misconceptions we have.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that helps, to shift some of the conversation and the awareness maybe in the public about what yoga is. That was my goal really with that book. Yeah.
You'll have to come back and talk about it when it publishes, because I think that's basically my mission too, is to get people to understand how diverse yoga is, and everybody can do it in one way or another. So that sounds great. I'll put that down on my list. All right.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for all that you do. I think it's great what you're doing.
I enjoy it so much. I love talking to people who are passionate about yoga. It's quite an opportunity and for me. Okay, so if you would like to know more about what Jivana's doing, his email address is Jivana, Jivana, @accessibleyoga.org. His social media links are in Facebook as Accessible Yoga Project and Accessible Yoga Training and Accessible Yoga Ambassadors. And there's the same kind of thing in Instagram. And I think your website is www.accessibleyoga.org, right?
Yes, and we also have accessibleyogatraining.com for the trainings. We're offering 30 trainings around the world this year. Wow. And the conference, I can mention our next conference is in St. Louis at the end of May, St. Louis, Missouri. And then in the fall, looks like we'll be in New York City again in October. And we're about to announce those dates, hopefully soon. Okay. Maybe you can join us someday. And I'm hoping to come to Australia next year in 2020.
Great. Let me know. And I will. That would be wonderful. Okay, so thank you so much, Jivana. As usual, you've added so much to the topic, and I think we have some really great things to think about given your expertise and thoughts. So I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.